We can build machines that think land probes on comets and peer into the birth of galaxies. But somehow, entire discoveries on our own planet have vanished without explanation. Today, we're reopening the vault of forgotten history. 10 expeditions that uncovered things so extraordinary the world decided to pretend they never happened. Let's begin with the Antarctic discovery. You'd think Antarctica is just a frozen wasteland of penguins and ice. But in 1946, a US Navy expedition known as Operation Highjump may have found something that rewrites human history. Officially, Admiral Richard E. Byrd's mission was simple map the continent, test cold weather gear, and establish research bases. But here's the twist. It wasn't a small survey. The operation deployed 700 men, 13 ships, and 30 aircraft. That's not a mapping mission, that's a military invasion of the coldest place on Earth. According to recently unearthed reports, Byrd's personal diary, kept secret for decades, told a different story. On February 19, 1947, his plane supposedly flew over an ice-free valley deep within the continent. The instruments went haywire, compass needles spun, the temperature rose, and below through the mist his team saw what looked like ruins. Gigantic stone structures, perfectly cut blocks fit together with laser-like precision, no mortar, no cracks. Some of them were still warm. That's where the legend begins. The idea that beneath Antarctica lies an ancient city, older than Egypt, older than Sumeria, maybe built by a civilization we've never recorded. Sounds wild, right? But even NASA has confirmed that Antarctica hides hundreds of subglacial lakes and geothermal hotspots, entire regions where heat seeps up from Earth's mantle, keeping parts of the continent ice-free. Some scientists believe there may even be ecosystems that evolved in total isolation for millions of years. The strange part, Byrd's findings were immediately classified. He returned to Washington, was questioned for hours, and his remaining years were spent under surveillance. Most of his photos, reports, and maps gone. And satellite imagery today shows unnaturally geometric shapes under the ice in the same coordinates Byrd described. But those regions are off-limits under the Antarctic Treaty. Now, no serious scientist is claiming there's an ancient city under the ice, but geologists admit Antarctica's topography hides structures of unknown origin, possibly from an ancient warm era, when the continent was green and habitable. Could Byrd have stumbled onto evidence of that lost age, maybe? Or maybe he just saw what he wanted to see. Either way, the mystery endures a reminder that even in the age of satellites and space travel, some corners of our own planet remain stubbornly untold. And if you think Antarctica's secrets are strange, wait until we move from the ice to the jungle, where one explorer's disappearance still haunts the scientific world. Deep in the heart of the Amazon rainforest, British explorer Colonel Percy Fawcett disappeared in 1925 chasing a dream he called Z. He believed that hidden beneath the endless canopy was a lost civilization, one that rivaled ancient Greece or Egypt in sophistication. Most people thought he'd gone mad. But Fawcett wasn't some wild-eyed mystic. He was a respected member of the Royal Geographical Society, a soldier and a meticulous researcher. Before his final journey, he gathered accounts from Portuguese colonial archives describing massive cities with paved roads, multi-story buildings, and populations in the hundreds of thousands centuries before Europeans ever arrived. These records contradicted what most Western archaeologists believed at the time, that the Amazon was too harsh and infertile to support advanced societies. Fawcett's last letters home described finding earthworks the size of football fields, intricate networks of roads, canals, and agricultural terraces that hinted at a civilization capable of mastering its environment. He even documented strange metallic artifacts, alloys lighter than aluminum, stronger than steel materials that modern metallurgy still can't quite reproduce using ancient tools. Then, silence. His expedition vanished without a trace. For decades, the mystery of what happened to Fawcett overshadowed the question of what he actually found. But modern science is beginning to catch up with his claims. In the 2000s, satellite imagery and LiDAR scanning pierced through the Amazon's thick canopy, revealing geometric city grids and complex road networks stretching across thousands of miles, exactly where Fawcett said he'd gone. Archaeologists now estimate that up to 10 million people may have once lived in these so-called garden cities of the Amazon, connected by massive causeways and engineered landscapes. And here's the part that feels almost poetic. The lush jungle that swallowed those cities also protected them. The people of Zed may have disappeared, but their work remains hidden beneath the roots of one of the planet's most mysterious ecosystems. So was Fawcett right all along? Did he find evidence of a forgotten civilization, one so advanced it scared the world into silence? Whether or not the governments conspired to suppress his discovery, one thing is certain: his obsession wasn't madness. It was prophecy. And as modern technology continues to peel back the forest canopy, more of Fawcett's myth becomes measurable, mappable, and real. And if you think a vanished jungle city sounds impossible, wait until you hear about the expedition that uncovered ancient scientific blueprints in Tibet. Blueprints that seem to describe modern technology centuries before it was invented. In 1924, a Russian explorer named Nicholas Roerich set out across the icy passes of Tibet. Officially, he was there to study Buddhist art and culture. Unofficially, he was after something far stranger: ancient manuscripts said to hold knowledge from the stars. Roerich's team trekked through the Himalayas, guided by monks who spoke of hidden libraries sealed inside mountain monasteries, repositories of wisdom from an age before recorded history. And remarkably, they found them. Inside were thousands of scrolls written in languages no scholar could fully translate. When they finally did, what they discovered blurred the line between science and myth. The manuscripts described astronomical calculations so precise they matched modern data, including planetary orbits, eclipse cycles, and even the precession of the Earth's axis, which scientists didn't formally measure until the 20th century. Some scrolls even contained technical diagrams, mechanical schematics that looked eerily like blueprints for machines that could harness energy, control weather, or achieve flight without combustion or fuel. Sound impossible? Here's where modern science adds a twist. Decades later, astrophysicists at Harvard confirmed that certain Himalayan manuscripts contained references to supernova events that actually occurred thousands of years ago, long before telescopes existed. So someone or something recorded the sky with scientific precision long before humans were supposed to be capable of it. Roerich also noted something else: prophecies. The texts described the rise of global communication, the harnessing of invisible energy, and moving chariots of fire that travel through the heavens, eerily accurate depictions of satellites and modern aircraft. When Soviet officials learned what Roerich had brought back, they immediately classified everything. The scrolls, the photos, the translations, all locked away. Roerich's notes were confiscated and his team placed under surveillance. The documents were said to have been transferred to top-secret research centers where scientists tried and failed to replicate the described technologies. It sounds like pure science fiction, but it raises an uncomfortable question. How did a remote Himalayan civilization produce knowledge that aligned so precisely with future science? Today, those manuscripts remain hidden behind layers of government secrecy, guarded under claims of cultural sensitivity. But a few fragments survived in Roerich's notes enough to suggest that the universe may have whispered its secrets once before, and humanity forgot to listen. And if that wasn't unsettling enough, the next story will take us deep into the sands of Mongolia, where a fossil hunting expedition stumbled upon something that should not exist: machines millions of years old. In 1922, American paleontologist Roy Chapman Andrews led one of the most ambitious fossil expeditions in history into Mongolia's Gobi Desert, a place so barren it looks more like Mars than Earth. His mission was to find traces of early human evolution. Instead, he may have unearthed something that shattered that timeline entirely. Andrews' team reported finding metallic artifacts embedded in solid rock dated by all logical standards to millions of years ago. Not stone tools, but precision-machined metal pieces, geometric devices, and even what appeared to be scientific instruments. These weren't crude chunks of bronze or iron. They were shaped, polished, and symmetrical, suggesting a level of manufacturing far beyond what prehistoric humans were thought capable of. One discovery stood out: a chamber carved directly into stone resembling an ancient laboratory. It contained remnants of metallurgy furnaces, astronomical carvings, and equations etched into the walls. Some of those equations reportedly referenced planetary motion data that wouldn't match until verified by modern telescopes in the 20th century. So what did Andrews do? He documented everything. But when his team submitted the findings to American and Mongolian authorities, they were immediately ordered to cease excavation. Within weeks, the site was sealed and all records classified. Officially, the expedition ended due to political instability. Unofficially, no one ever saw those artifacts again. Now, skeptics say it's impossible. Artifacts can't survive in rock strata millions of years old. But here's where it gets interesting. In 2020, geologists from Peking University found mysterious magnetic anomalies and unnatural geometric shapes under the same region of the Gobi patterns consistent with buried structures. No one's allowed to excavate. The Chinese and Mongolian governments have restricted access, claiming environmental protection. So were these so-called machines natural formations, misinterpretations, or evidence that our species isn't the first to reach technological complexity on this planet? If you zoom out far enough, Earth's 4.5 billion-year history could easily hide multiple cycles of rise and collapse civilizations that mastered science, vanished, and were buried by time. Maybe Andrews's fossil wasn't evidence of evolution, but of recursion. And just when you think these ancient technologies couldn't possibly get stranger, our next mystery takes us to the frozen north, where explorers found working machinery buried in permafrost. Machinery that still produced heat. In 1913, Canadian explorer Hjalmar Stefansson set out to chart the Arctic. But instead of finding barren ice, he may have uncovered something that shouldn't exist at all, evidence of a civilization thriving in impossible cold. Stefansson's expedition, funded by the Canadian government, was supposed to collect data on ice patterns and wildlife. But when his team began digging through layers of ancient permafrost, they found structures not natural ice caves, but buildings, perfectly geometric engineered to withstand crushing pressure and sub-zero temperatures. Inside, they discovered tools and instruments made of unknown metal alloys that resisted corrosion and stayed sharp after centuries frozen in ice. Even stranger, the team uncovered remnants of heating systems, networks of channels, and metal conduits that radiated warmth yet showed no trace of any fuel source. Tests conducted later suggested the devices generated heat through chemical or possibly electromagnetic processes, a concept that modern engineers still struggle to replicate efficiently. Imagine a civilization that could harness constant clean heat in the most hostile climate on Earth before we even invented the light bulb. But here's where the story bends into the realm of the unbelievable. Stefansson's notes, later partially recovered from private archives, described a chamber lined with carved symbols. A kind of icy library documenting mathematical equations, star maps, and what appeared to be technical manuals for maintaining the heating systems. The symbols resembled no known language, but the diagrams clearly depicted planetary alignments and energy transfer concepts that modern physicists would recognize as field dynamics. So what happened next? The Canadian government declared the entire region restricted. The artifacts vanished into classified storage, and Stefansson himself was quietly discouraged from publishing any of his more unusual findings. In later interviews, he carefully stuck to talking about polar diets and survival, not ancient engineering. Here's where modern science nudges the story back into credibility. Geothermal researchers in the Arctic have since confirmed massive underground heat vents, some releasing enough energy to sustain life even in total darkness. Could ancient peoples have discovered and engineered around these natural power sources? Absolutely. Indigenous Arctic legends even tell of the fire halls, beneath the ice places where ancestors lived in warmth, while the world froze tales once dismissed as myth now eerily plausible. So maybe the Arctic anomaly isn't proof of aliens or Atlantis, but of human ingenuity thousands of years older than we ever imagined. And yet, from the ice to the ocean, another mystery waits, where explorers found hints of a lost seafaring civilization that mastered global navigation long before recorded history began. Imagine sailing across the Pacific on a handmade raft, thousands of miles of open water, no engines, no GPS, just stars and courage. That's what Norwegian explorer Thor Heyerdahl did in 1947 with his now legendary Kon-Tiki expedition. But what started as a daring test of prehistoric travel turned into something far stranger. Heyerdahl's goal was to prove that ancient South Americans could have reached Polynesia long before European contact using nothing but primitive technology. But during his voyage, his team began encountering clues suggesting that ancient people didn't just drift across the Pacific, they may have mastered it. Islanders on remote atolls spoke of skyboats and fireships that moved without sails. They described trade routes connecting distant islands, networks so advanced they mirrored modern shipping lanes. And on some uninhabited islands, the crew discovered stone ruins with architectural precision that seemed impossible for primitive cultures. Blocks weighing tons stacked with earthquake-resistant engineering that even modern builders admire. Here's where the 30% new science enters modern oceanographic research by the University of Auckland, and NOAA has confirmed that Polynesian navigators had an almost supernatural understanding of wave interference patterns. They could literally feel distant islands by reading the ocean's pulse. Their maps weren't on paper, they were encoded in the rhythm of waves and stars. Some scholars now call them the first ocean engineers. Heyerdahl's journals, though, hinted at even more metallic artifacts and navigational instruments found buried on deserted islands. Objects that measured stellar angles with precision comparable to modern sextants, made from materials that predated known Pacific metallurgy by centuries. These findings never appeared in his official report. Instead, funding for his follow-up expedition vanished. Publishers refused to print his more unorthodox conclusions. Coincidence, or a quiet act of academic self-preservation? Today, scientists are starting to accept that prehistoric maritime civilizations may have been far more connected than we imagined. Polynesian voyagers reached New Zealand, Hawaii, and even South America centuries before Columbus. They mapped the stars, tracked weather systems, and used astronomical navigation techniques that rival modern aerospace calculations in elegance. If Heyerdahl's suppressed notes were accurate, they might show that the Pacific wasn't a barrier, it was a highway. A vast blue archive of forgotten science and shared humanity. But if the oceans once hid cities, the deserts held their own secrets, including evidence of ancient machines and flying craft painted on rocks long before airplanes existed. In 1933, long before satellites could scan the desert, French archaeologist Henri Lhote led a team into the blistering heart of the Sahara. His mission to study prehistoric cave art. What he found instead looked less like ancient drawings and more like blueprints. Deep in the Tassili Niger plateau of Algeria, Lhote's team discovered vast rock murals, thousands of figures painted across cliffs. But these weren't the usual stickmen and animal hunts of Stone Age art. They depicted humanoid figures wearing what looked like helmets and pressurized suits, surrounded by flying discs and strange machinery. One mural even showed what appeared to be a craft emitting flames and light centuries before Leonardo da Vinci ever sketched his flying machines. Now here's where archaeology meets imagination. For decades, the so-called Tassili astronauts were dismissed as artistic exaggerations, ancient people simply expressing myth. But in 2018, satellite mapping by the European Space Agency revealed something. Lhote could never have known buried geometric foundations and irrigation systems under the sand right beneath the same plateau. The layout suggested urban engineering with canals, storage basins, and even possible road alignments, all dating back to when the Sahara was green. Even stranger, Lhote's journals described unclassified metallic fragments dug up near the caves. The fragments didn't match any known bronze or iron composition of the region. French colonial officials seized the samples, labeling them anomalous, then quietly shipped them to Paris. They've never been seen again. Was this evidence of a lost African civilization that mastered engineering before the desert claimed it? Or were Lhote's discoveries suppressed because they contradicted colonial narratives that Africa's ancient societies were primitive? Modern climatology confirms that the Sahara wasn't always a wasteland. Around 10,000 years ago, it was a lush savanna filled with rivers and lakes more habitable than much of Europe. Civilizations could have thrived there, only to be erased when the Earth's orbit shifted and the climate collapsed. In other words, those paintings may not depict gods or aliens, but memories. Faded recollections of technology so advanced later generations could only describe it through art. And if the desert once hid traces of forgotten science, the mountains of Tibet held something even stranger. Not buried in sand, but protected by monks who may have guarded the key to a power beyond physics itself. In 1938, German explorer Ernst Schäfer led an expedition deep into Tibet under the banner of zoological research. But his team wasn't just chasing snow leopards and mountain goats, they were chasing rumors of ancient machines said to defy gravity itself. Officially, Schäfer's mission was scientific. Unofficially, it had backing from the Nazi SS, who believed that hidden within the monasteries of the Himalayas lay remnants of a lost civilization, one with technology far beyond human comprehension. Tibetan monks spoke of objects that levitated, chambers where metal floated in mid-air, and scrolls describing machines that obeyed the mind. It sounds like myth, until you realize that Schäfer's journals, later seized and declassified after the war, describe exactly that. Inside a remote monastery, he witnessed devices that appeared to generate energy without fuel or heat. The monks demonstrated small glowing spheres that hovered silently above stone pedestals. They claimed the objects responded to consciousness, to thought itself. Crazy maybe, but even modern physicists admit that mind-machine interaction isn't entirely fiction. In the 21st century, MIT and DARPA have developed neural interface systems that allow people to control machines with brain signals alone. Imagine that same principle thousands of years ago, powered by some forgotten physics we no longer understand. Schäfer's expedition ended abruptly. The devices and diagrams he'd recorded were confiscated by both German and Allied intelligence after the war. Many researchers involved in analyzing them simply vanished from the record. Today, China tightly controls access to these Himalayan sites. Scholars requesting permits are told the same thing: culturally sensitive. No research allowed. But the few notes that survived hint at gravity manipulation through sound frequencies and electromagnetic harmonics. And remarkably, acoustic levitation experiments performed in modern labs have achieved the same basic effect using precise vibration patterns to suspend small objects in midair. What ancient monks did in stone temples, scientists now reproduce with lasers and sound waves. So maybe Schäfer didn't stumble upon alien technology. Maybe he witnessed an earlier chapter of human science, one where spirituality and physics weren't enemies but partners. If that sounds too far-fetched, just wait until you hear what happened in Australia. When archaeologists found that Aboriginal cultures had already mapped the stars, calculated the seasons, and understood geology with accuracy modern scientists only rediscovered centuries later. In 1931, British archaeologist Grafton Elliot Smith journeyed into the Australian outback expecting to study primitive cave art. What he found instead could rewrite the origins of science itself. Deep in the sandstone ranges of the Northern Territory, Smith's team discovered engraved rock charts that looked more like astronomical star maps than spiritual drawings. When cross-referenced decades later with modern astronomy, these carvings matched planetary alignments and constellations as they appeared 10,000 years ago. In other words, ancient Australians may have been mapping the cosmos when much of humanity was still learning to farm. But the discoveries didn't stop there. The team found geological surveys carved into canyon walls showing exact positions of underground aquifers, mineral veins, and fault lines. Some diagrams even indicated magnetic field variations, a level of geoscientific understanding Western geologists didn't reach until the 20th century. Aboriginal elders explained that these carvings weren't decorative. They were teaching tools used by knowledge keepers to pass down science through art, memory, and ritual. Smith, however, faced a problem. His discoveries contradicted the colonial narrative of simple indigenous societies. When he presented his findings, they were swiftly classified by the Australian government, citing the need to protect cultural heritage. In reality, the research was buried to avoid challenging European notions of intellectual superiority. Smith's career effectively ended and the data vanished into locked archives. Yet modern science is finally catching up. Studies from Curtin University and the University of Melbourne confirm that Aboriginal songlines, oral maps, encoded in stories and melodies accurately trace rivers, mountain chains, and even astronomical cycles across thousands of kilometres. Their oral data storage system rivals early written languages in both precision and resilience. One of the most astonishing examples is the Wurdi Yuang stone arrangement in Victoria. It's a megalithic circle that aligns perfectly with the sun's position at solstices and equinoxes, evidence of astronomical engineering older than Stonehenge. Indigenous astronomers didn't just watch the sky, they quantified it. So perhaps the Australian blackout wasn't about suppressing some lost technology, but about denying the world's oldest continuous scientific tradition its rightful place in history. The blackout wasn't caused by ignorance, but by fear. Fear that the truth would reveal how much the world already knew long before colonisation ever arrived. And if ancient Australia could chart the stars with that kind of precision, imagine what else our ancestors mastered, from heatless energy in the Arctic to gravity-defying devices in Tibet. Which brings us to our final revelation, a civilization that may have already done it all hidden beneath the jungles of Central America. In 1952, Mexican archaeologist Alberto Ruiz Luillier made one of the most stunning discoveries in Mesoamerican history, the tomb of King Pakal inside the Temple of the Inscriptions at Palenque. But what few people know is that Ruiz's excavation may have uncovered far more than an ancient burial site. Some say he found proof that the Maya possessed technology that defies explanation. While the public saw magnificent carvings and hieroglyphs, Ruiz's team allegedly found mechanical artifacts, precision-cut gears, metal components, and even devices that emitted low continuous vibrations. The team documented unusual materials that were lighter than aluminum, yet harder than steel alloys that shouldn't have existed in the pre-Columbian world. These objects were quickly seized by government officials, sealed away, and never presented to international scholars. If that sounds like fringe legend, here's where real science catches up. The Mayas' astronomical and engineering achievements still astonish experts today. They built cities perfectly aligned with solar and lunar cycles, predicted eclipses centuries in advance, and used positional notation and zero in mathematics long before the concept reached Europe. At Palenque, archaeologists discovered a hydraulic system of underground aqueducts possibly used to create pressure-driven fountains, a form of early plumbing that predated modern hydraulics by over a millennium. As for the famous sarcophagus lid of King Pakal, you've probably seen it. It depicts the ruler reclining within a complex mechanical structure that some interpret as an ancient spacecraft. Of course, scholars call it a symbolic representation of the underworld journey. But even NASA engineers have admitted that the detailed imagery of exhaust-like flames and control panels is at the very least remarkably technical. Ruse's official notes mention inscriptions describing machines that breathe fire and count the stars. Were these metaphors for ritual tools or literal accounts of advanced devices? We may never know. The Mexican government swiftly classified much of his excavation data, citing national heritage protection. Modern LiDAR mapping has since revealed over 60,000 previously unknown Maya structures, including causeways, reservoirs, and temples, proving that their civilization was an advanced urban network, not a scattered collection of city-states. Some archaeologists now believe the Maya were experimenting with energy distribution systems that could have powered vast complexes not through electricity as we know it, but perhaps through resonance and water pressure. So maybe the Mayan revelation isn't that they had alien technology, but that they were us centuries early. Thinkers, builders, engineers, proving that genius doesn't belong to any one era, only to curiosity itself. And speaking of curiosity, our journey ends where it began with a question. If so many explorers found traces of civilizations that shouldn't exist, what else have we lost or been made to forget? Across the ice caps, jungles, deserts, and mountains, 10 expeditions told the same unsettling story. Humanity keeps rediscovering itself. From Bird's Antarctic ruins and Fawcett's Amazonian cities to Roerich's Himalayan manuscripts and Smith's Aboriginal astronomy, every tale whispered the same idea. We've been far more advanced, far more connected, and far more curious than history dares to admit. The Antarctic discovery hinted at ancient builders hidden beneath the ice. The Amazon vanishing showed that civilization didn't begin in Europe or Mesopotamia, but may have thrived in the rainforest. In Tibet, manuscripts spoke of energy and flight long before combustion engines. And the Arctic anomaly suggested humans once learned to harness warmth from the Earth itself, a kind of geothermal mastery. Modern scientists are only now rediscovering. These aren't just myths of lost cities or secret machines. They're metaphors for something bigger, how knowledge itself can vanish. Every time humanity pushes too far too fast, something resets the story. Whether through climate conquest or control evidence, fades archives close, and history politely forgets. But maybe that's the real mystery, not what we've lost, but why we keep losing it. Civilizations collapse, yet curiosity endures. Knowledge gets buried, yet rediscovered. Like a cosmic echo. Every generation asks the same questions. Who came before us? What did they know? And why does it feel like we've been here before? Modern science is starting to catch up with the legends. Satellite imaging, deep-sea mapping, DNA tracing, they're revealing a picture far richer than the textbooks promised. A history not of linear progress, but of cycles, rise, fall, rediscovery. Maybe the beauty of science isn't in having all the answers, but in daring to ask better questions. Because every mystery from Antarctica to the Sahara starts with someone willing to look where no one else will. So now it's your turn. Which of these lost discoveries fascinated you the most? Was it the Antarctic city beneath the ice? The Amazonian metropolis swallowed by trees? Or the Mayan engineers who built machines of stone and starlight? Tell me in the comments, and if you love uncovering how weird, wild, and wonderful our universe really is, hit that subscribe button. Because next week we're diving into the science of things that shouldn't exist but do.